Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast. We're going to do something a little bit different this week. Kinrise is an investment and development company transforming heritage buildings into unique workspaces. Where and how we work has fundamentally changed. Hybrid working, talent wars, and green legislation have combined to mean companies are under increasing pressure to find a new type of workplace for their business to flourish. This has created a unique opportunity in the commercial real estate market. We can hear now from founders George Aberdeen and Samuel Lawson-Johnson on how Kinrise are one developer seizing the opportunity.
Isn't this actually a really bad time to be investing in commercial real estate? Do companies even want an office at the moment? Construction costs are up, rates are up, markets are all over the place.
Rule number one for making good money investing in real estate is to buy it well in the first place. And now is that moment.
Hi, I'm Sam.
I'm George, and we're the co-founders of Kinrise.
We started investing in 2005 and spent 10 years buying and selling on behalf of institutional pension funds, property companies and private investors. And we saw firsthand the benefits of being a commercial landlord. But actually at the same time was the emergence of creative workspaces like co-working companies. We saw great things happen, we saw companies growing. And so in 2015, George and I started Kinrise with the expertise to bring together the excellence and rigor of an institutional real estate strategy with the culture, creativity and activation of a managed workspace to create buildings that would outperform.
At Kinrise, we are specialists in finding and investing in iconic and historic buildings. We focus heavily on the culture and working environment in our buildings, where people will want to come to work, where they will thrive. From an environmental perspective, there's a huge focus at the moment on new builds and the way that they perform. What we do at Kinrise is focus on recycling existing buildings, saving the embodied carbon, and creating space for tenants who have very ambitious net zero goals for the future.
We've invested over £100 million in 12 projects across 5 cities of the UK: Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Birmingham and London. We're excited to build the first nationally recognised portfolio of iconic and historic buildings, fully upgraded and full of life.
There's been huge change in the real estate industry, but it also brings huge opportunity. And we're looking for the right partners to come and join us as we play our part in the renewal of UK cities.
Recently, Kinrise launched their latest fund, targeting investments in the repositioning of iconic commercial real estate assets across UK cities. Kinrise have already secured the backing of family offices. They're now calling new investors to partner with them in creating one of the UK's most exciting portfolios of iconic buildings. Apart from being a great guy with an awesome business, which also so happens to be a client of Rockbourne, George was one of the first 8 people who trusted me and came on the People, Property, Place podcast. And we recorded this episode way back in October 2022. Given they're on the road fundraising, I wanted to reshare the conversation in case you missed it. So, if you're traveling to see an asset, if you're out on a run, walking the dog, or at the gym, check out the conversation I had with George. You're not going to want to miss it. Today we welcome George Aberdeen, co-founder of Kinrise, to the podcast. Welcome, George.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Not at all. Thanks for coming in. So a place I always like to ask guests when they come on the podcast is, how did you get into property?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story, actually. I've, on a very simplistic level, followed my father into property. He was working as a property developer in central London, or his office was in central London. They're developing all over the country. And I really enjoyed going into his office and spending time there. And it felt like a kind of industry that worked for my type of mentality, which is kind of, I wanted to have a real job, so to speak, but I didn't want to be in the office very much.
Yeah.
And so going into property felt like a good place to go. And so, yeah, my father enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed it. And so decided to go and do my degree in real estate at Oxford Brookes, pushed by him. I didn't actually want to do a degree. I just wanted to get started. But he persuaded me to do the degree to at least have some sort of credentials.
So how old were you when you first realised that property could be a career that you could follow as well?
I was probably 10 or 11. The thing that's quite interesting about this is that as a family, we have an estate in Scotland. And so it has now become my responsibility. And I always knew that it would become my responsibility when my father died. And so it's always been in my mind that I need to have a job that can support that as well as my family. And, making money has been central to my mindset from quite a young age, just to make sure that, the rule one of these things is sort of don't lose it. Yeah, and they're not big money spinners, despite popular belief. So that was my mindset. And I actually went into property to make money. That was the core reason. And
to fund the estate, or to be able to make sure that...
Just to be sure. It was an unhealthy... I can see your face drop. Oh my goodness, I've got someone here who's just going to talk about all he cares about is making money. But I've had an epiphany that I'll tell you about. But the real reason that I wanted to work in a commercial real estate career was to make money to support not only my life and my family's life, but also the whole of that estate and the community in it and everything that comes with it, which is absolutely central to me and to my family. It's been there for a very long time. And my family's always had the mentality for generations that we look after it, we steward that place. And it's on behalf of it's not just holding land, and it's not the case of being a landlord to lord over other people, but it's actually to lead by serving all of those people there. Yeah. And to look after it for future generations, whether they be the actual owners of it or people who are living there. And has felt like a very heavy burden quite in the past. And it now feels like a huge blessing, having worked through a few mental issues. But my mentality was that I need to make money. And the place to do that is in commercial real estate, because I kind of get it. And I've seen my dad doing it.
So your dad had the same burden as a 10-year-old, or like epiphany as well?
Yeah.
And he needed to make money.
Yeah. So he really loved it. And I think whether he needed to do that or not, he would have done the same. And I think I would have done the same as well. But my kind of core mission going into this was I need to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. And, there's a kind of not a small part of me that would really actually prefer to be ploughing fields, chopping trees, managing the waters and the, woodlands, etc. And so it was a decision that I made to not do all of that stuff so that I could actually get into a career and hopefully do more of that stuff in the future.
So your dad advised you to go to university. You went to uni to get a degree in real estate.
I did. Yeah, I went to Oxford Brookes University, got a degree in real estate management. I'm very bad with academics, find it very hard to get stuck into all of that sort of thing. So I got the degree, and like I said, there was kind of a large part of me that just wanted to get stuck into work. So while I was there, I had 3 jobs, none of them in property, but just doing various things. And so I was focused on those as well as my academics, and, a bit of going out and having fun, which, can sometimes distract from going to lectures.
But a rite of passage nonetheless. Yeah. And then post-degree, you landed at Knight Frank?
I did, yeah. Real estate at Oxford Brookes is very sort of organised. So there's the milk round, and all of the big companies come round and they try and find the best people, and we interview with all of these guys. I don't know if that still happens now, but when I was there, the big firms came to Oxford Brookes to interview us, some of them, and others we had to get to London. And so I had loads of interviews. I was in that last era where people actually got jobs after leaving universities pretty much before leaving that real estate course, and the year after and the year after that it was much harder. I got a job offer from Savills and from Knight Frank. Decided to go with Knight Frank. So I joined the graduate scheme there, and it was great. Really enjoyed it.
What rotations did you tick off?
So I started as a West End lettings agent, which is quite a gentle landing because it's great fun. There's a lot of socializing and you can get stuck in. The great thing about that job is that if you're the partner running that department, you're doing almost the same job as the people who have just joined, but you're just doing it on much more high profile lettings. And so everybody can get stuck in straight away. And I was given responsibility for, various office units that needed to be let, and then ran with it. It was great. I love that.
And did you rotate into different departments, or did you manage to stay there until you got your letters?
So then I went into the property management division.
Yep.
Which is a completely different thing, and great because I learned how to do lots of technical things, including reading a lease, which is actually surprisingly hard, particularly in those old-fashioned ones, which are written in kind of Shakespearean English. They're much, much easier to read now, but it was great to kind of understand how the nuts and bolts of property work, and what goes into actually not just putting a tenant into a place or buying a building, but actually making sure that the tenant is happy when they're in there and that the place is being run well.
Yeah.
So I went from there, I was in there, and then I actually had a secondment to Merrill Lynch.
Okay.
Which was quite unusual. There was only one other person who had done that in Knight Frank, the rotation before me. So I had a taste of sitting in an investment bank. It was in the property services division, so running their own occupational portfolio for the bank rather than invest.
You weren't trading, making a load of money.
I wasn't trading real estate.
No, you weren't making millions a year. Straight away.
No, sadly not on the Knight Frank graduate scheme. And then from there, actually went into their business, Knight Frank's business that at the time was called Rutley Capital Partners and is now called Knight Frank Investment Management. And that was phenomenal. I felt like I'd kind of found what I wanted to. I found the right place for me, as insofar as the right place to actually, or the right way of being in property was for me to be in that fund management.
So moving from an advisory to a bit more of a fund management role, it just kind of pull those skills together.
Perfect. Yeah. And I really like it because it pretty much covers all areas of property without having to specialize in one particular thing. So to be an investment manager, you're structuring investment structures, dealing with the accountants, the administrators, speaking to investors, finding properties, buying properties, structuring the debt, finding tenants, doing the refurbishments, everything. You have to do all of that. And of course, using incredibly talented specialists in their fields, but it's more like a whole picture of what's going on rather than I'm not so interested in being a specialist in one particular area.
Yeah, applying your skills to a broad range rather than just being a West End agent forever and being one-dimensional. Not that West End agents would want to be called one-dimensional. Yeah. But what happened after or during Knight Frank in terms of moving?
So interestingly, then it's almost where the Kinrise story starts, because I was at Knight Frank I started in 2005, and then by 2009, I was sitting there as an asset manager, the kind of graduate asset manager of the European fund that had invested hundreds of millions of euros. And quite a lot of people had been made redundant around me. And I think they kept me because I wasn't getting paid very much. And then there was one other asset manager, maybe two. And it was our job to try to not lose too much money. And so it's like, please can speaking with values, please can the valuation not go down too much this quarter? It's quite a sort of depressing situation to be in. And so it was at that time that I was introduced to Sam Lawson-Johnston, my now business partner, one of my now business partners. And he was introduced to me by my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And she thought that it would be interesting for us to meet. They'd grown up going to church together. She wanted to introduce me to say, this is a great guy. He's in property. I think.
So he was in property as well?
He's in property as well. Yeah. And so we met up. We had our first date in Green Park with a Pret sandwich, and became very good friends very quickly.
And you're 26 or so at the time?
Yeah, I'm trying to work. Making me do maths in my head now. But I think that's about right. So we met then and, met up quite frequently to have lunch and talk about how we're getting on in our various jobs and see how things are going. And then actually in 2008, I bought a house, and Sam needed somewhere to live. So he said to me, I'll move in with you, but there's only one part of this deal which you need to keep to, which is that you can't get married for a year, because he'd lived with 3 people previously who had got married in quick succession. So he'd had to be he was kicked out of the house. And so I did stick to that. It was 1 year before I got married. and so we lived together. And then in 2009, as Sam said, come and meet his partners at Cording, where he was one of the founding partners. to talk about potentially working there, because there was things going on in the future. It sounded quite exciting. And so, yeah, I met with them, started working there. We had a little bit of time there at Cording. I got married just a couple of weeks after starting at Cording, actually in 2009. And that's when Sam moved out of the house, which is quite nice. We had 2 weeks of working and living together.
Quite intense.
It's quite intense. Yeah, definitely. And it showed up who was working harder as well, because if we didn't go home at the same time, then it was obvious that someone was still stuck in the office. So yeah, Sam and I worked there together. We helped set up part of that business, which is called FORE Partnership, founded by Basil Demaritis and one of the founders of eBay, who's the seed funder of it.
Yeah.
And had a few years there. And then end of 2014, we decided to leave and we set up Kinrise in January 2015.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So at Knight Frank, it was European based, and then the move to Cording was more UK focused.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've gone from big geographies right the way down. So at Knight Frank, it was all over Europe. At Rutley, Knight Frank, if you want to call it Knight Frank Investment Management, it was all over Europe. So it was, flying to Sweden, Netherlands, Denmark, Poland, Germany, Spain, all of these places. And it was, fun. But at the same time, I didn't really know those places.
Did you speak any of the languages?
No.
So it's not even like you're bilingual or trilingual.
No,
that's why you were brought into it.
No. I was given the option. Do you want to work on a UK fund, which was investing in sort of really good quality real estate, but it was like a shopping centre in Slough.
Yeah.
Or do you want to go to Europe? And I was like, yeah, obviously Europe.
Yeah.
I'm young. I want to go traveling. And the person I was working for said, just to let you know, this is not glamorous.
Yeah, the first 2 weeks, couple of flights you'll enjoy.
Yeah, exactly.
But that 4 or 5 a.m. trek to
exactly.
Heathrow.
We were sitting on the bus going from the business car park in Heathrow to the main terminal at 5 a.m. And he said to me, it's not glamorous. So that was quite a wide geography.
Yeah.
Then at Cording, we were focused, at Cording and FORE Partnership, we were focused on the UK and Germany.
Yeah.
And again, I don't speak German, and we did some great deals in the UK, great deals in Germany. But going from kind of north of England to, Cologne, and you're kind of working out how these cities work and what the best investment strategy is and whatever else, for me was quite hard. And now at Kinrise, we are UK focused in a very select number of cities.
Yeah.
So now if you say to me, which street in Manchester would you like to invest? I know. And I know what side of the street, I know which tenants are meant to, which tenants are looking for the kind of space that would go in there.
Yeah.
Who our contractors could be, who our community manager might be, and it's the same for all of the other cities that we work in. And I think from our perspective, because of how we like to do, that's the best way to invest.
So your best mate, Sam, worked with him, kicked him out of your house, and then worked at Cording and FORE. And then you set Kinrise up in 2015. How did that come about? And can you just talk to me a little bit about the business and, what your vision and plan and mission was for the firm? Yeah.
So this is the thing. So I started out just wanting to make money and realized that that's just no way to live your life. And I got really disillusioned with the whole thing. And I was really down in the dumps about it, because I knew that I had this kind of fake obligation on my shoulders that had not directly or purposefully been put on there by anybody, but it had just built up over years. You kind of pick up the vibe that, just be careful, because this is going to be on your shoulders if you screw it up. So I kind of picked all of that up and that unhealthy thinking. And like I say, there was a part of me that wanted to be a farmer. There's a part of me that wanted to be a gamekeeper and a forester. And there was also a large part of me that wanted to try and do something worthwhile. That all of that is worthwhile, but to try and do something worthwhile from a more direct kind of social justice perspective. So while we were at Cording, we got stuck into a piece of work with a think tank called the Centre for Social Justice, who wanted to. We went to them and said, we think it would be a good idea for you to do a piece of work on the issue of human trafficking, as it was called then. And they said, yeah, of course, we'd love to do that. But actually, the issue we've got is that we're funded by various very generous people, but we're fully allocated right now. And we just can't pick up this topic unless you guys go and raise the money. So as a group, I can't remember how many, it was about 9 people. And it was including me, Sam and Harry. And we decided to go out and raise this capital. It was I can't remember exactly how much it was, but it's about £200,000. And so to just raise that for a charitable endeavour, we didn't run any marathons or do any bungee jumps, but we just went and asked people.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about something that was called human trafficking, and in lots of circumstances still is, but it's actually modern slavery. And that was part of the piece of work, to actually try and change the language so people understand that we're talking about slavery, which is a huge issue in the United Kingdom with British people and with foreign nationals. So this is not a kind of foreign problem. It's not an immigration problem, despite the government's move over the last few days to change it back to being an immigration issue, which is very, very sad. But we got stuck into that piece of work. We raised the money. Sam and I sat on the working group to help collect the evidence. Yeah. And like we say, we were kind of muggles amongst wizards, because there were some seriously impressive and very clever people around that table, from the police and from law and from the legal professions and charities and whatever else. But we were part of it. And actually that work led to a piece of legislation being passed called the Modern Slavery Act. And so it was quite a journey, and showed us that you can actually do something worthwhile if you just put your mind to it. And so from my perspective, there was a problem that I had, which is I want to make money in business, but I also separately want to be doing things in the rural setting. Yep. And I also want to be doing some work on social justice. Yep. And how on earth are you meant to juggle those three? And so thinking it through, what we realized is that actually business done well has an amazing impact on the people and the communities that you interact with, and on the whole of the United Kingdom, which sounds very grand, but we're playing a small part in a big machine, which is ultimately capitalism. But capitalism is the mechanism that has lifted billions of people out of poverty over the last few decades, or a couple of 100 years.
Quite, yeah.
And it is a great system, which is often exploited and outworked badly.
For ill gain.
But that's actually an issue of greed. It's not an issue with capitalism. So what we realized is that you can run a profit-making, good quality capitalist business in a responsible and healthy way, and still have a good and worthwhile impact on the environment, on society, and make a financial return. And so, hey presto, we kind of integrated all of that stuff together. Sometimes people ask me, why did you set up Kinrise? And I jokingly say, I set up Kinrise so I could actually give myself a job that I wanted to have. And so that's a kind of long-winded way of telling you how we got to the start line.
So your perspective really shifted in the years that you were in London.
Yeah.
Opened up to probably more than you realised was going on. And then through conversations with Sam and opening your eyes to various different social issues, managed to create or kind of find a passion, I guess, that you didn't know was necessarily there, but you're really interested in. And then you think, how can I combine all three parts of my world right now into a business?
Yeah, exactly. And Sam, I'll give huge amount of credit to him, because he's incredibly thoughtful about this kind of thing. And so, in large part, my eyes were open to a lot of this stuff through him.
Right.
And he's very well networked in the world of people who think like this. And there's various kind of groups and conferences and things that Sam loves going to. He reads up a lot about it. And so I would be lying if I said it was my own work.
So you and Sam, but where does Harry, and Harry's his brother, where does that fit in?
Yeah.
And how do you extract yourselves? Because it sounds great, but actually genuinely, how do you extract yourself, and how do you set up a business? Because, you mentioned you were married at the time, and you've got commitments and obligations, and how do you go from creating a vision of a business underpinned by a really strong, compelling mission to actually creating it?
Yeah, so the answer is with a huge amount of difficulty. And so we sometimes talk about when you set up a business, you're a naive optimist. Then you become an informed pessimist.
Right.
And then you become an informed optimist, because you've kind of worked your way through the initial sludge. But it's a very difficult thing to do, to set up a business. And it's very rarely in this kind of world simple and quick to find a route to success. And actually, when we set up, someone said to us, just to let you know, this is going to take you 7 years to become a really viable, strong, profitable business. And it is actually year 7 this year. And they're right. So, and that's not the same for all businesses, because, you know, what we have in front of us is quite a sort of burdensome infrastructure with compliance and legals and accounting and offices and all this kind of stuff, which takes longer than, you know, one-man band who's got a new business idea, which can be a lot quicker. Sam and I were going to go and sit in a serviced office, just the two of us, and kind of set up a business.
Yeah, money into an account.
Yeah, or try and find people to back us or whatever. We just thought, you know, yeah, we can do that, no problem, it'll be fine. And then realized quite quickly that it was going to be more complicated. And thank God we spoke with Harry, who was running an incredibly successful and very interesting business called LJ Partnership at the time. And so part of their structure as a wealth management business was to have in-house joint venture real estate teams. So they'd identify a theme that they thought was interesting. Then they go and find the team.
Yeah.
They'd form a joint venture, provide working capital, offices, accounting, lots of lawyers.
Yeah, all the back office.
All that kind of back office stuff. And then we could just go and do our jobs, which was to find great properties, invest in the cities, and deliver the business plan. And that's what happened. So we were there for a few years. We did a management buyout at the end of 2014. But that was a great landing pad for us. And I'm really glad we started in there.
And it gave you what, the confidence or ability that you can do it by yourself and improve the concept or refine the strategy?
And there's a few things that we probably thought we were better at than we actually were. So structuring investment vehicles, all the compliance that comes with it, accounting, you know, the legals that go in, even just into a real estate deal, the legals, you know. And so to have people sitting there in-house next to us who were working with us on all of those various different things was very empowering and made it a lot easier for us to get on with what we're good at, which is, like we say, delivering the business plan.
So you kind of exited that, formed Kinrise. Talk to me about Kinrise as a name and what you guys are doing. What, you know, 7 years in, where's the business at right now?
Yeah, so, well, Kinrise as a name is an interesting one. So like I've talked about a little bit, we're very focused on, you know, being an outward looking business that's of benefit to the people, individuals, the environment, etc. And so Kinrise is a name that came out of a process that we went through with a marketing team. And we chewed over it, and we're thinking, she was particularly one lady there called Lou, who's incredible and had worked in-house with Nike and Levi's and various things. She's very, very clever and thoughtful and challenging, because she was asking us questions that we had never thought about. And so she was trying to dig out of us what we were all about. And so she came in one day and she said, right, I've worked it out. I've looked in the Bible. You're like Boaz. And so she'd gone into the Old Testament and she'd found the story of Boaz, which is in the book of Ruth, who is a farmer, a big landowner, who would farm his land in a way that would be of benefit to everybody. So instead of picking up every single grain or every olive or whatever he was farming from the ground, if it fell, he would leave it for other people to come and pick it up. So and they could glean from his farm. And so everybody there would benefit. He would take plenty of what he wanted, not the maximum. And so from our perspective, we're a business that likes to run as a business where we take plenty of profit, not maximum profit necessarily. And he in the Bible is referred to as being the kinsman redeemer. And so kin came from that, and Kinrise also, on a more simplistic level, kin is for community and family. And so for community and family, rising, Kinrise felt like a good name for that.
Quick one from me. If you haven't already subscribed or followed this show on the podcast or app where you listen or watch, please do. It takes 10 seconds and helps tremendously. I've got really big plans for the People, Property, Place podcast, and that one small action really, really helps grow the show and the presence and enables us to keep doing what we're doing. So if you haven't already, please follow or like on the platform you watch or listen to. Thanks so much. And so as a business, you've got numerous properties over the UK. Like you said earlier, you've dialed in your geographical focus and you're focused on restoring existing real estate buildings.
Yeah.
Can you just talk to me about your strategy and what it is that you look for in a property?
Yeah, sure. So everything that we do, we're focused on looking at things through 4 different lenses, or 4 different capitals, as we sometimes call it. And so we look at human capital, which is to try and operate in a way that brings individual flourishing and thriving. We look at social capital, which is more looking at the communities of people in the buildings and outside of the buildings and trying to connect the two. We look at environmental capital and financial, and that they all they rank equally in our mindset. And so when we're looking for buildings, we are very specific about which buildings are right and which buildings are wrong, because there's thousands of buildings across the UK, which are probably quite a good financial investment, but they don't really meet the other criteria. There isn't really the opportunity to start looking at those other 3. Maybe environmental, but not particularly the other 2. And so what we do is we go into a city and look for iconic and historic buildings. And we work in the center of the city, right there where the community is. And there's lots of different reasons for that. One of the reasons that we do that is because if you knock a building down and build a new glass and steel one, then the community of people who have grown up with that building there previously suddenly feel alienated from the new building that you've built and not really allowed in through the front door. Whereas if it's a building that has always been there for hundreds of years or 100 years, then they feel like there's a kind of community ownership to it. You can't also really create character in a new building like you can by drawing out the character of an old building with all of the history and everything that goes with it. And so that's why we love looking for these historic and iconic building. The other thing to say is that by knocking a building down and chucking it in landfill and then building a new one, your new one might be absolutely second to none from an environmental perspective. You know, carbon zero, rainwater harvesting, solar panels, you know, living walls, all of this kind of stuff.
Yep.
But because you've thrown the previous building in the bin, you've effectively got decades before you get back into a carbon credit compared to just refurbishing an old building, where the environmental credentials might not be quite as good as they were before, or they could be, not quite as good as they could be if you were to build a new building. But compared to throwing a building in the bin, it's much, much better.
There must be some real technicalities, because I don't want to get into too many of the granular parts, but where do you get the increased massing or the square footage to justify the cost of the refurb and drive the...
Well, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we just, most of the time we buy buildings which are pretty much empty. So we're not paying a full price for them as if they were kind of fully up and running buildings. So the buildings are nearly empty or fully empty. And so we've got a clear run at them and we buy them at that kind of entry price.
Yeah.
And then we do all of the work that's needed and then fill them up with tenants when we get the capital uplift. And so it's not, but it's hugely challenging to refurbish listed buildings, and most of them are listed. So we go through that process and it's, it's labor intensive.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
But it's like it's living what you said you're going to do at the start, right? And I think conversations we've had in terms of recruitment over the years is, I don't think I've come across a business that has been so set on its mission, vision, values, purpose, and refers back to it all the time and still lives it through every single day. And, I'm sure there's lots of people probably listening to this who would probably be looking at a building and think that asset ticks 3 of the 4 lenses and would compromise. It doesn't sound like you guys compromise any one of those values.
It's not necessary. You don't need to compromise on any of them. And I think that's one of the big kind of lies that people have had to believe for decades about the way that business works, and it's massively changing. So that we're not unique in this at all in taking this approach. But you don't have to compromise on financial return to be doing business responsibly. It's just not the case.
So how do you finance these deals, or how do you raise the capital for these deals?
So we're funded by a group of family offices and one US institution. And so we've got various structures. We've done single investor, single investment. We've done a closed-end fund, and the last few deals we've done deal by deal with a single investor or a majority investor investing alongside us. And it's one of the challenges that there has been of doing deals deal by deal is that you make an offer and then you have to run around trying to find the money, which doesn't work. So one of the things that has been great for us is actually to bring a new shareholder into the business called ABS. So ABS is a US investment company. they're headquartered in the US, but have an office in London where the main decision makers are based at the moment. And they brought working capital into the business. That was in 2020 that they became a shareholder of the business. And they've actually also provided a line of capital for us to draw down on to secure a deal.
Yeah.
And then we can bring equity investors in afterwards. Which just means our execution has been phenomenal.
So you can buy it in cash, move really quickly, and then you can you can syndicate it out later, recycle the capital.
Exactly. So we've done, I think, our best investing since being able to execute so quickly.
Yeah.
And to be making offers on buildings with 100% confidence that we're going to provide the capital straight away as soon as we need to. And it's not a case of the sellers chasing us, but us actually chasing the sellers to get the deal done quicker.
How much emphasis do you put on ABS as a partner through the four lenses? How much forensic detail do you look into their business? Or is it, selecting a partner like this? Do you kind of go through multiple different conversations with different people and veto them because they don't have the right credentials?
Yeah, so it's one of the things that we say when getting into a relationship, any kind of business relationship, is that you have to go through a process, which is 1, to get to know each other, 2, to do something small, and then 3, to maybe do something bigger if that works, if everything plays out in 1 and 2 correctly.
Yeah.
And so ABS, and in particular Harry, have known each other for a very long time. Harry's, I can't remember how many years, but it's one of his first jobs was with ABS, as in their previous business before they set ABS up. And so he knows them incredibly well, trusts them, they trust him. We got to know them. They were looking to do things in the UK and solved some problems for us in bringing that line of capital.
Yeah.
And actually, yes, having those conversations about what matters to us and what matters to them is absolutely fundamental. And I think it's one of the things that people fall down on because they think the values of the capital doesn't matter.
Quite, yeah.
Because as long as you've got the capital,
quite,
you can just go and invest.
Yeah.
Who cares what they think? And that's absolutely not the case. It plays through.
So they're very aligned.
They're very aligned. Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit about assembling a team from a day-to-day investment, asset management, development management team who are going to be responsible on the ground at Kinrise, but also assemble an advisory board, because you guys have got an epic advisory board, and then assembling teams outside of the core Kinrise team, maybe teams that you assemble to work on particular projects that you buy.
Yeah, so I'll start on the advisory board, which is, we've got a group of people who are phenomenal and they are much wiser and more experienced than us in lots of different areas, from investing to education to tech and various other areas where they can, we have a call with them roughly quarterly to catch up and hear their view on, what's going on in tech in the US. How are you seeing this all play out, in private equity? And there's lots of different mindsets and skill sets on that call who kind of knock us back into place. And, one of the gigantic challenges that we've had as a business is COVID.
Yeah. And
particularly as an office investor, getting multiple phone calls from tenants saying that they're never coming back to the office was quite stressful.
Yeah.
But actually to have an advisory board who can help us work through some of those questions and give a different perspective to the one that we're seeing in our very narrow view is incredibly helpful. And so those people have come out of our network, and we take networking very seriously, it's not necessarily, drinks in the pub on a Friday, but it's going to conferences, going to events with people from different walks of life. So, whatever that might be, but we make it our mission to find and get to know interesting people, and they've got on board what we're doing.
Awesome. And then in terms of building or assembling a team in-house at Kinrise?
Yeah. So is this the bit where I'm meant to talk about you?
No, it was more about talking about character competency and chemistry, which I've always remembered from the meetings that we've had when you quoted that to me, through kind of not a lens, but a view of which you assess or you look at people.
Yeah. So interestingly, that actually came from one of our advisory boards. So there you go. But building a team in a business is one of the biggest challenges. HR is really difficult. And just generally building So sitting in a room when it's just the founders and you're kind of taking on the world and everything's, just scrapping.
Yeah.
That's great and that's interesting. But when you actually start to create a business that has people in it, then it becomes a different thing. And so building a team has to be done very carefully. And we are slow to hire and we get to know people over time. And I think we've hired incredibly well, thanks to you. And so we now are a team of 8, and we have a very strong emphasis going through our interview processes on, like you say, character, competency, and chemistry. And we're not focused on some of the things that would be a sort of typical thing to have a look at, which I'll come back to. So, character is things like honesty, integrity, fortitude, humility. It's not arrogance, pride, all of these things that can make someone really difficult to work with. And competency is not how good is a person at doing the job that you're hiring them to do, but it's can they learn to do the job that you are asking them to do. It's almost better to have somebody who needs to learn and is willing and able to learn than it is to have somebody who's like, yeah, I know, I've got this all cracked. I know exactly how it works, because then that person can grow into your culture.
Coachability aspect.
Yeah. And then chemistry is very important because, they need to get on with everybody and they need to be part of the team and click with everybody. And so those are some of the lenses that we look at, and we interview probably in quite an informal style and just get to know people, hear a little bit about what they've done. But as you know, I don't think I know anybody's A-level results. I definitely don't know their GCSE results. I know they've all done degrees because I just remember that, but I don't know what grade they got in their degree. And I don't find it interesting because I don't think traditional education necessarily is a particularly good measure of how someone's going to do in the workplace. And it's something that I've been learning a lot more about recently, but it makes a huge amount of sense to me that actually when we go to school, that means all the way up to whenever you're at school, 16, 18, whatever it is. And even if you go on to university, so up to 2021, you're playing a game that is measured in a very narrow and I think relatively unhelpful way, which is, can you learn pretty much by rote, and can you write it down on a piece of paper at the end of the year when you're asked that question again? And that's not a particularly interesting result, I don't. What's much more interesting to me is people who are good at that sort of thing, of course. And I just don't want to be misread here. People who are good at exams and sort of traditionally intelligent are fantastic. And we need those people. And they're the people who get great results, and that's good. And we need them. But there's a lot of people who slip through the net, and they're the people who are sort of branded as with like learning difficulties. But actually, if you look at it, not as a difficulty, but as an asset.
Yeah.
And it's the neurodiverse. So, you've got people with dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, autism. They're the people who really struggle at school for different reasons. And there's schools and universities. I mean, universities are not so focused on any of this stuff because they kind of expect people to have worked out how they tick by the time they get there. But schools are very focused on the neurotypical and just make life work easily for them. But the neurodiverse in those categories that I just said really struggle. And so can often come out of school feeling a bit stupid, a bit like maybe some people have to be the kind of class joker, or they have to, be the cool kid who's kind of doing stuff a bit wrong, or they have to play up in order to kind of fit in or just have something. But actually what is now being realized is that those kind of mindsets, those brains are not dysfunctional, but they're different. So they're genetically different, and you can't heal it, but you can unlock its potential. And that's when you create a very, very interesting person. And so there's people throughout history who we talk about, like Picasso and Da Vinci and Churchill and Richard Branson and Steve Jobs, and the list is endless, Edison, who are these amazing disruptors who have come out and shown us that there's a completely different way to do things. And they're often, not always, the people who have not done particularly well at school. And so that's why, it's a long-winded way of me saying to you, that's why I don't know what they've done for their A-levels or their GCSEs, because I think there's very different ways of looking at people and understanding what their competencies are. And it's often, speaking for myself as a dyslexic, I started learning when I left university and I got into the workplace and then I was off.
because real estate you had an interest in it and a desire to pursue it, and it overrode, or it took over, where maybe doing maths and English and science didn't give you the same stimulation or ability to excel?
So with a dyslexic, for example, there's three main challenges that they have, which is reading, remembering facts, and spelling. And so that really matters at school, because you have a history lesson about the Second World War. There's 5 different dates in the lesson that you've just had, and 6 different names of famous people that have done X, Y, and Z. And you come out of it, no idea, can't remember. Yeah. And you take notes and that's okay. But, people, and then the notes have got spelling mistakes in them and stuff. So it's hard. But when you come out, and actually now in particular, and schools are much better at this now by using technology, but technology completely solves all of those problems, because, I'm a prolific note taker. So I can actually remember everything that I've said and heard in a meeting. Yeah. All computers have spell check, and I'm kind of okay at reading. It takes me a long time, but people who really can't read very well, your computer will read to you. So that's all the challenges solved. That's it. Problem gone. Forget it. Not a thing anymore. So you're actually free to apply yourself properly, and you start, as the confidence grows, that you realize that actually you can do things and you can learn. And sitting in a meeting, having a conversation about something in a work perspective, suddenly things start clicking. You're like, wondering about that. Yes. You should have seen me during COVID when my children were learning from home, and it's like, how do I do long division? It's like, I'd never known. Yeah. No idea. Still don't know.
But you can run a spreadsheet. Yeah. I can underwrite a building.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how do you think you should assess or include people in a process? You obviously said that you take quite a long time to get to know people, and you don't look at the CVs, and even if they were littered with spelling mistakes, you probably wouldn't notice yourself anyway. But how do you?
It's not necessarily it's not that intentional to sort of try and look for people like this. But I find that by focusing on the right things, people come through. And again, not to be misread, it's not the case that we're thinking, a kind of high IQ, neurotypical, normal-ish person is not for us. That's not the case at all. And that's a very worthwhile, good person, good people to have in the team. But I also would normally want to meet as many people as possible for a role. And we do read, reading the CV is interesting, particularly because of the work that has been done in the past and how long they've stayed at various jobs, which is becoming increasingly short. But I don't think there's particularly a way of sort of seeking out people. But, just as one example, LinkedIn recently have added a skill to their arsenal, which is dyslexic thinking. So as people are beginning to look at it as an asset rather than a liability.
How do you bring this all into play with the external consultants and the occupiers or the customers or tenants that you have? I think, did I hear that you run a coffee shop that's run by day release prisoners? Or have I made that up?
Yeah, no, we do. We did. Yeah. So that was in a building which we've sold, but it's part of playing out those values and wanting to do something interesting in these cities. And ultimately, one of the things that I haven't said yet is that Kinrise gets really excited about playing its part in the renewal of UK cities. And because we see culture flow from cities. So if we can create a place for people to work that then flows back into their social life and their family life and into the city, then those cities start to have an impact on the whole way that the UK operates. And again, I don't want to sound grand. It's us playing our part. It's not us doing the whole thing ourselves, but because there's lots of interesting things that go on in these cities. But we are very intentional about who we hire to go into the buildings. We have community managers in each of those buildings, and we are very intentional about which tenants go into the buildings. And so, with that comes that influence on the values that we're playing out.
Does it get strained as you grow? Have you felt the strain trying to juggle all these different balls at the same time? And has it been close to breaking? Or do you think you've laid strong enough foundations and everyone's on board that it won't break because people know the lines?
Yeah, so it is strained. And actually, you mentioned the cafe staffed by prisoners on day release. That in some ways is one of our greatest stories, because it's a building in Manchester that has the full spectrum. So what we try and do is to create buildings where you can have people coming in for a day on a co-working day pass.
Yeah.
They can be there for a week or a month, or they could have a studio for 5 people in a company that's, a commitment for 6 months or a year or whatever they want, all the way through to multinational corporates who are taking a 2 floors, 1 floor, big, multiple 10,000s of square feet office space upstairs. And so there's this whole mixture of people. And in that particular building, we wanted to create a cafe on the ground floor that was a place for people to come and grab a coffee, hang out, get their breakfast, get their lunch. And so we approached a charity called The Clink. And The Clink was founded by some very interesting people who wanted to create restaurants in prisons that the general public can go and visit, and the prisoners' staff. So then it's teaching them how to cook, how to serve food, how to do everything that goes with hospitality, that hospitality sector. And so we thought, well, why don't you set up a cafe outside of prison? And in our heads, we thought, oh, people are coming out of the prison as in released, and then they can go and work in the cafe. But they actually said, no, what we'll do is we'll get the food prepared in the prison, and then people can come on day release to work in the cafe. So this was, which was really interesting and I didn't know this but people who get towards the end of their prison sentence can kind of prove that they're ready to go back into society by going on day release, getting it right, going back in the evening. There's no one watching. They take the bus or whatever to get to their work, and then they go back in the evening. And so we had these guys coming in to work in the cafe, and it was such an incredible thing because you've got them thinking, I can't believe I'm in a kind of mainstream office building, and seeing that it's possible to kind of be in there and be accepted and take an order and whatever else, and they're getting trained up and they're getting
and no one's labeling them.
No one's labeling them. And then we had one of our tenants, Puma.
Yeah.
Puma then said, this is amazing. We really love these guys. We're going to give each of them a free t-shirt and a pair of trainers. When they come to work, they'll have some like cool, clean, new kit that they can wear.
Yeah.
So they started getting to know each other. So you've got a global brand and people in prison who are engaging with each other and getting to know each other. And then people going back to prison saying, I've got a friend who works at Puma, and people at Puma going home and saying, I've got a friend who's in prison. And it kind of blows barriers and boundaries between people. And so that's an incredible thing. It's also, financially very difficult to run a cafe financially sustainably. And so lots of challenges come with that, so it was a great dream and an amazing delivery. And then of course, Uncle COVID came and
torpedoed it for a while,
wiped them out for a bit. Yeah.
So in terms of moving forward, what is the plan for the business? What's the vision? What else do you need to or want to achieve and build on?
We feel really well set up now to do more of the same, pretty much. We keep looking at slightly bigger buildings than the ones that we looked at before. So, and I think there's a cap on that. I don't think we want to be going much further beyond the ones that we've recently bought in Manchester and Liverpool.
50 mil, is that the...
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a price thing, but it's more a size thing, to actually just have, because 50 mil in London gets you a kind of studio, and outside of London, it gets you, a whole huge building. And so we're more focused on size. So we don't want to do anything below sort of 30 or 40,000 square feet, because if it's too small, then you can't have the ground floor activation and really create a special place for people to come to with that community manager in there who's welcoming people and loving those people. And so to have something too small doesn't really work for us. But we want to we're currently invested in Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Birmingham and London.
Yeah.
But we are ready to do more cities. So we'd like to invest in Edinburgh and Glasgow, probably Bristol. And then there's maybe a few other cities that we would go to after that once we've built up enough quantum in those cities. But once we've done that, we can build the portfolio in those places. And one of the things that we're trying to flip at the moment is that obviously we've been investing family office capital with people who have trusted us with their money, and they want it back relatively soon. In the more kind of private equity style.
3-5 year business
3-5 year business plan. Go in, refurbish the building, fill it with tenants, sell it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. What we're now turning our minds to is actually how can we have longer term hold periods?
Yeah.
Because that's when you really have the ability to do much more on this community stuff and the environmental. So we want to be building a longer term portfolio across all of those cities. And over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll find our way into that place. But we need to take longer than expected. But we're in a good place, and we've got great capital partners who are talking about doing that with us.
And from the three buckets we mentioned earlier in the conversation, do you feel fulfilled across all three, from a financial perspective, an impact perspective, but also an ability to steward the estate back home and the responsibilities that you have there?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because actually one of the things that I've realized is that to steward that estate well, it's not just a case of using money. It's all of the skills that come with being at Kinrise that apply there. And it's all of the skills that I've learned there that apply at Kinrise. So they're completely integrated. So yes, if things continue to go well, at some point we'll start making some good money, and, we're doing fine, but it's, the bonuses will start flowing hopefully at some point. But we have to integrate what I've learned at Haddo, which is to be amongst people from all different walks of life. Everybody's equally as important as each other, very community focused. It's quite interesting because when you have a place like that, you're not even really trying to make a big profit. You obviously want to make a profit so that it all works, but it's kind of accepted that it's never going to be a massive thing, massively profitable.
Need it to wash its face and sustain it.
So it's more focused actually on the environmental aspects and the people probably. And so there's a huge spectrum of skills that come with that. And, learning how to speak with people from all different walks of life in that context is fantastic. And then, that applies to Kinrise as we go around these different cities and we run an office building. Having a rural estate and having an office building is actually quite a similar situation. You've got the people who are coming for a day. You've got the people who are coming for a month. You've got people who are there for decades, and you've got a team, and you've got to look after it and maintain it well and refurbish things and collect your rent. And all of those things are the same. It's just that one of them is quite spread out and the other one's more concentrated. And so I feel very well set up to look after everything that's going on in Scotland, having learned business, financing, and how to negotiate a contract, and how to run a team, and how to analyze whether something's worth doing or not doing. All of those things are very good. So I feel very well integrated on those things, and I spend I would like to spend more, but I spend plenty of time outside in the countryside, enjoying the nature. And so, those three things that we started with feel are very well integrated, and I feel extremely fulfilled, which is great.
Awesome. As we draw to a close, a question I ask everyone, I feel like I'm going to know the answer before I even ask you, but if you were given £500 million of equity, who are the people, what property, and which place would you look to deploy that cash?
Yeah, I know that I'm sorry to be boring, but basically that's the business that I'm currently running. So we haven't got 500 million yet, but we're working towards that in the next 5 years or so. And so our current team is pretty much set up to do that. We would probably need 2 or 3 more people.
I'll make a note.
Yeah, exactly. I'll let you know. And so once we would build a team, we would invest in the same cities, and we would continue on with our efforts to play our part in the renewal of UK cities. Because we're incredibly excited as a business, as founders, about the United Kingdom. And I know that there's a huge amount of challenges out there, and we've got a lot of things to think through and things to overcome as a nation. And I don't want to sound too kind of over patriotic, but we're really passionate about the United Kingdom and its potential as a great place with a global standing, and the way that we play our part in that is really exciting to us.
Awesome. Well, look, George, thanks for coming in. It's been awesome working with you and supporting you in a very small way, and I'm incredibly encouraged to hear about all the things that you're doing, and I'm excited to see what you and the team go on to deliver.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague. Give us a rating, like, or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of guests that we should have on the show, or areas of the market we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit leadership and future leadership hires for real estate owners, funds, investors, and developers. So if you're looking to hire top talent for your business, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you'll be able to find a wealth of information, or feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.